Streaming the broadcast from the big server box on a towering tower high above beautiful Galveston Island, the Electric Theater Radio Hour is on the air. Saturday, February 10th, 2012, and it's time for episode 138 of Electric Theater Radio Hour. Well, let's call it the Heidi Thiess Show this episode, because I have an interview today with a woman who's running for District 24. That's up there over across the bridge, ladies and gentlemen. However, you need to listen to her. This is certainly one of the best interviews I've ever experienced. This woman is so articulate. It's just incredibly thought-provoking and informative, and you get a real behind-the-scenes look at the political maneuverings, movings, and shakings that go on that we rarely see. Okay. Today, I talked to Heidi Thiess, candidate in the Republican primary for Texas House District 24, this seat that was vacated by Larry Taylor as he campaigns for Texas Senate District 11. Heidi is perfect for the radio hour. She's electric. Heidi is the personification of what you see is what you get, or in this case, here. She enlisted in the military at age 17. She became an officer at age 20. She says her oath to protect and defend the U.S. Constitution from enemies both foreign and domestic inspires her to this day, and that's why she's running for office as a Tea Party conservative in the Republican primary. Whether you agree or disagree with her philosophy, Heidi will make you stop and think. It's an interview that is informative and riveting. So, without further delay, better get right to it because it's almost an hour. Okay, time's wasted. Time to get in, get on with it, get it over with, and get out. Get it, got it? Good. Here we go. But first, Rachel Delgado is running in the Republican primary for Texas House District 23. Craig Island is currently in that seat. Rachel Delgado is the candidate who can send Mr. Island home to his big house in Austin so that she can represent the citizens of Galveston, Texas City, Lamarck, San Leon, Baycliff, Bolivar, and the people in Chambers County. Unlike Mr. Island, Rachel Delgado lives here. Rachel is the daughter of a union pipe fitter and grew up in Texas City, where she and her husband are raising 4 children. She's been active in local government for years and is a small business owner. In the last few years, Rachel began to closely follow the activities of the Texas legislature. She started attending the meetings. She watched. She listened. She studied. She became concerned. So concerned, she founded the Galveston County Tea Party. Rachel Delgado, conservative Republican for fiscal responsibility, limited government, and free market solutions.
The more I observed, the more I realized that Craig Island did not listen. Voters in November of 2010 made it very clear they wanted fiscal responsibility, tax relief, and accountability. Representative Island is focused only on finding new ways to tax and continue irresponsible spending. I said, enough is enough, and decided to take action. I want to take that District 23 seat from Mr. Island and give it back to my friends and neighbors here in District 23.
Rachel Delgado is a common-sense conservative who fully understands what's at stake for the Texas Gulf Coast area. She's the kind of representative we want in the Texas legislature. More importantly, she's the representative we need for District 23.
It's time District 23 was represented by someone who understands the needs and special concerns of our area. Someone who lives here and is devoted to our success. Someone who will be responsible with our hard-earned tax dollars. A person of integrity who will honor the public's trust. You are District 23. You are Texas. Beside fighting for financial accountability, I will work to institute free market solutions to our windstorm insurance needs, to help market the Port of Galveston, and push back against the EPA's job-destroying, over-the-top regulations. I'm a rental property owner and manager, a small business owner, and a mother of 4. And I care about their future, and I care about the future of District 23.
Look at the record. Where is your current representative? It's pretty clear. No plan is an island. Rachel Delgado has a plan. Conservative Republican for fiscal responsibility, limited government, and free market solutions.
I'm asking for your vote in the Republican primary on April 3rd, 2012, to be your voice and to send Craig Island home.
Taxed enough already? Elect Rachel Delgado on April 3rd in the Republican primary. Visit RachelDelgado.com to find out more. Political advertising paid for by Elect Rachel Delgado, Inc., J. Arrington, Treasurer, P.O. Box 843, Hitchcock, Texas 77563. And now, from Heaven's Megaphone, this week's edition of the Electric Theater Interview. Welcome to the interview portion of Electric Theater Radio Hour. It's a beautiful, foggy morning here on the island, and I'm sitting across from the Rebel, Heidi Thiess. Heidi is running in the Republican primary. I believe that's April 3rd.
No, that's been changed, George. We don't even know when it is now, but it's definitely not going to be April 3rd.
From the redistricting.
Yes, right.
That was Heidi the Rebel herself. I was building up to this grandiose intro.
Oh, have at it.
And she already corrected me, which is not unusual. Back to Heidi.
Let's just have fun, George.
We're going to have fun. And as we get into the politics of it, it's not only going to be fun, it's going to be informative, it's going to be entertaining. And let me tell you, this woman is intense. I've seen her speak. In fact, that's why she's here today on Electric Theater Radio Hour. I saw her at the Herman Cain rally, a couple of months ago, and she was one of the speakers, and I was really impressed. Big voice, big ideas. So I asked her, would you come on the show and talk about it? Now, she is going to be running for District 24. And Heidi, what cities and counties does that encompass?
Well, it's mid and north Galveston County. So Kemah, League City, and Friendswood in the north. And then coming down through mid-county, it's going to be Dickinson, Hitchcock, Santa Fe, Bayou Vista, a little bit of Lamarck, and then all the way down to Tiki Island. And then it stops right there at the causeway.
We've had Rachel Delgado on previously, and she kind of takes up the rest of it from Texas City to Galveston and Bay Cliff and some of the smaller Bay town thing. And I've often seen these two together.
Thank you.
The first challenge is to get through the Republican primary.
Yes, right.
Who are you running against the seat to challenge the Democrats?
There's two men out of Friendswood that are running, one by the name of Ryan Sitton and the other Greg Bonin.
What separates you from them?
Besides the fact that I'm a hard-charging fighter and a woman and besides all that, no. A rebel.
From an early age.
I'm a rebel woman. What sets me apart is my involvement, my engagement, and my lifelong commitment to the conservative cause. I am currently sitting on the board of directors for the Clear Lake Tea Party. I'm also on the board of directors for several veterans organizations. I have served my country in uniform for 6 years. I enlisted first as a 17-year-old young woman in college. I simultaneously joined ROTC and served in the reserves while I was in college. Upon my graduation from college, then, I had a degree in international affairs with a specialty in, get this, Soviet politics.
What time frame was that?
This was in the early 90s. I graduated in 1991 from Marquette University. Really, right before I graduated, the Berlin Wall came down in Germany. I was looking at my specialty in Soviet politics and lamenting the fact that it was no longer Soviet politics, it was more like Russian history.
Yes, right.
It all just, everything I had memorized and learned and studied, it kind of just whoosh, it just kind of got swept away in all of the new Russia. Okay, so then I had a minor in military science, and I also graduated and earned my commission as a second lieutenant in the United States Army. And then after that, I went through my officer basic course. I went to airborne school. I was the only female officer to finish my airborne training, jumped out of the airplane, out of a perfectly good airplane a few times, and then I was stationed in Germany.
Jumped out of a perfectly good airplane.
Yes. And it was a rush.
That could scare people with a fear of flying because they're going to think, well, what are the others? They're not good?
Well, you know, it's true. I have a fear of heights. And I figured what's the best way to get past your fear is to just look at hang your butt out of an airplane.
Okay,
That's the best way to get past
I'll catch up with you.
The thing that I liked is that I know now from a very early age that I can push myself way beyond what your mind sets limits to. Your mind will set limits on yourself. yourself and you think this is as far as I can go and I can't get any past that. And you blow through those barriers. It's something that I think is really valuable to learn when you're young, and it carries well into adulthood. You can blow past those barriers. There are no limits. And that was something I learned really hanging outside of an airplane.
From cheerleader to basketball to paratrooper.
That's right,
lieutenant. Okay, General.
The reason I bring this up is because from a very early age, I was raised in a very patriotic, politically engaged family at the grassroots level only. We've never been power players. We've always been grassroots activists. My mom was very involved in the pro-life movement as a child. Much to my chagrin, I was dragged along to many of her prayer vigils and many of her demonstrations and whatnot. And sometimes, as an awkward teenager, that gets a little embarrassing. And Dad was always on the stump for some conservative and would always have our cars wrapped in signage or on the top with these big banana boat signs on the top. And we lived in such a small town. I was like, oh, Dad, everybody knows our car. So embarrassing. But
this small town, is it Wisconsin?
It is in Wisconsin, yeah. It was a foundation, George. Sure. It was the values that my parents, when I look back on it now, what might have been, everything's embarrassing for a teenager. And what might have been embarrassing then was really truly what I value today as an adult. The values that they instilled in me. There's a no compromise streak that I come by very honestly that I get from my family. My dad served in the military. Both my grandpas served in World War II. One grandpa was a CB, the other was in the Army in Italy. My uncle was in the Navy. I've served in the Army. My younger brother is a Marine, once a Marine, always a Marine. My brother-in-law is Air Force. I mean, really, we've got the entire service covered except for Coast Guard. So if anyone out there is Coast Guard and wants to be adopted.
Just knew from talking to you previously that you had your own army.
Oh, man, I never thought of it that way, George.
I'm sure you did. It's covert. After you destroyed the Soviet Empire, you decided to invade League City.
Oh,
yeah,
here we are.
And it'll probably be harder.
Yes. Oh, you're right. All of that to say, back to your original question, because I have a lot of fun talking about some of the more adrenaline-fueled things I did in my youth. All of that to say that service has always been part of my makeup, and it started when I was 17. When you take an oath in the Army, I took mine as a 17-year-old enlisted woman, and again when I was a 20-year-old commissioned officer. And that oath is to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States from all enemies, foreign and domestic. That oath is something that you swear before God and country. I never have been released from that oath, and I dare say anybody out there listening who is a veteran or who has served would say they feel the same way. That's a bond that we all share. We don't feel released from our oath just because we're out of boots. Mm-hmm. It carries through the rest of your life. Now you see this surge in veterans who say, I'm called back to duty, except now it's in my community. I'm called back to duty. Now it's in my state or it's in my federal government because we see what's going wrong. Mm-hmm. And we're like, we're trained. We have the leadership training. And we have this oath that drives us. This is our fuel. It's not that I'm trying to downplay my passion or my intensity, because I want people to understand I come by it honestly. This is something that's in my blood. I could no longer separate myself from this drive than I could from my own family. It's who I am. So that, right there is what sets me apart from my opponents. My opponents are, I don't know what they've done. I mean, they've made a lot of money and I'm happy for them. And they've created jobs and I'm happy for them. I want them to keep doing that. I don't begrudge them any success at all. I've had my own level and share of success, as have everyone. Where have they served selflessly and continuously? Where have they practiced and put into play these conservative values that they're now espousing? They have very many talking points. What I have is a lifetime of experience. I have walked my talk. This is something my parents taught me from a very young age, and to this day I decry hypocrisy wherever I see it. If you have not walked your talk, I've got nothing in common with you.
I have to applaud you for two things. The fact that you're not a born-again conservative or Republican simply to take advantage of the change in philosophy or what people want these days. A lot of people are coming out of the woodwork and all of a sudden they're conservatives. It doesn't ring true. You grew up with it. That was a fascinating background. And I have never heard anyone make that analogy between taking the oath in the service and coming back and practicing it as a citizen and feeling that faith and that drive to continue to do so in your private life. Being involved with the Tea Party, the Constitution is a big deal.
It is.
How do you bring all of this to the state level, being in the Texas legislature?
Well, you just mentioned the Constitution. Now, I've taken an oath to defend it and to protect it, right? That means that when I see something like the cronyism, the backroom dealings, the petty games and manipulations that I see going on in the people's government in Austin, away from their view, away from their understanding, it infuriates me because the power is vested in the people. And the state government is the closest and most powerful tool that we have as people to express our will. Not the federal government, the state government. So when I would go to Austin, and I was in Austin this entire last session, and I saw the games and the pettiness and the personal agendas that were driving some of these decisions. And I'm not saying that they're all like this, but there are too many legislators like this that are in Austin for their own personal power and gain. I see them compromising on issues that are core to the conservative cause, and it outrages me. There's only so much talking about it that I can do. There's only so much worrying, fretting, and complaining that I can do before I finally just have to slap myself and say, if you want the job done right, Heidi, go there and do it yourself. Don't keep looking for these guys. A leopard will not change his spot. Some of these legislators, and I'm not talking about the Democrats. I actually have more respect for a Democrat that holds the line on his liberal or progressive policies, because then that means I know my opponent and I know exactly where he's coming from. What I cannot stomach are the rhinos who say one thing and act like another. And you see it all the time in Austin, and you see it all the time in Washington, D.C. It is corruption to its core, and I will not stand for it anymore, because our last line of defense here in Texas is our state legislature. And if they're not strong enough to protect the people from the federal abuse of power, the federal encroachment of power, then they need to get out of the way and let patriots get in there and get the job done.
We'll be right back to our interview with Heidi Thiess on Electric Theater Radio Hour, but now... Heidi Thiess, expertise. Proud of the military career that inspired her to run for office in the Texas House to represent you, her neighbors in District 24. Proud to be a lifelong conservative who won't compromise her principles of fiscal conservatism, tax relief, and support for the U.S. Constitution.
Service has always been part of my makeup, and it started when I was 17. When you take an oath in the Army, I took mine as a 17-year-old enlisted woman, and again when I was a 20-year-old commissioned officer. And that oath is to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States from all enemies, foreign and domestic. That oath is something that you swear before God and country. I never have been released from that oath, and I dare say anybody out there listening who is a veteran or who has served would say they feel the same way. It carries through the rest of your life.
Heidi Thiess, a voice of reason, speaking up and speaking out for you. Vote for leadership, confidence, and principle. Vote for constructive action in your state government. Vote to stop big government and return it to citizens. Heidi Thiess, expertise.
What I have is a lifetime of experience. I have walked my talk. This is something my parents taught me from a very young age, and to this day, I decry hypocrisy wherever I see it.
Vote for Heidi Thiess in the Republican primary, candidate for Texas House District 24. Political advertising paid for by the Heidi for Texas campaign, Jerry Bentley, treasurer. And now back to our interview with Heidi Thiess on Electric Theater Radio Hour. On this show, I interview a lot of political candidates and office holders. I have to keep reminding people because the general public is under the impression the most votes occur every 4 years in national elections. Mm-hmm. And I keep telling everybody, no, it starts with your city council, your mayor, and then your state representatives. That's where it happens in your day-to-day life. The stuff the federal government does is more of a blanket thing, and right. Yes, but it doesn't necessarily often and not quickly get into your day-to-day life. Mm-hmm. The state level and at the local level, this is where we live, and these things affect us immediately. It's obvious that it's all about the people to you. It's all about the citizen and being represented. We've already seen in 2010 the rise of people like yourself that are citizen-friendly. Mm-hmm. It's like you're representing your kids and your family. As a result, we all become your friends, and you're kind of protecting us, and it goes right back to that your early career and the Constitution and doing your duty. I mean, you're not doing it for the money.
Right. We're talking about a $600 a month gig. This is not about the money. This is definitely about the conservative cause, something I have lived for and worked toward my entire adult life. You really hit the nail on the head, George, when you talked about the representation side of things. Our founding fathers, the framers of our Constitution, intended for this to be a representative republic. We are not a democracy, we're a republic. That means that we elect people from among ourselves who live in our communities. We choose our representative and we send them to the Capitol, whether it's in Austin at the state level or DC at the federal level, to represent our concerns to the government, to represent our say and our will to the government. What has happened is that is flipped around, and now it's opposite. Instead of going there to represent us, our representatives are going there making deals, cutting corners, none of it within the accountability or within the purview of the public, all of it behind closed doors. Then they come back and deliver the verdict to us and tell us how it's going to be. I'll give you a perfect example at the federal level when we were struggling with the whole debt ceiling debate. I'm part of a citizens taxpayer advocacy organization that would call our representatives and say, we absolutely do not want you to vote to raise the debt ceiling. 2 minutes after the vote, not more than 2 minutes, our phone was ringing, and it was a congressman who was calling not to say, done deal, I heard you, I heard your voice, and I did exactly as I represented you. I did exactly as you chose. Instead, he called to try and weasel out of his vote. He had to spin it somehow. He had to say, well, he had a lot of excuses as to how he ended up voting against the will of the people. And after a while, you're like, what are we doing here? You see it at the local level. I was at a League City council meeting, and they were voting on something, and they made a kabuki theater show of letting the citizens come in to have a say. So citizens got off of work early, came in, they had some prepared statements. They read through them. I was fascinated by every single one because everyone's got their story as to why they believe something should be this way in their city council. And then they took a vote. Really, George, the vote was predetermined. They already knew how they were going to vote. This whole show of listening to the people. So it's not just at the federal level, and it's not just at the state level.
You would explode if you came down here. That is practically verbatim what has been happening here. But I remember 4 years ago when they were voting on, I believe it was the Marquette development in the West End, and the public commentary went on for, 4 or 5 hours. It went on till midnight. And oddly enough, at the end when the vote came, a number of the representatives read from typewritten speeches.
Prepared speeches.
That It was a show. Kabuki theater. I loved that. It was as if nobody had driven down here, stayed till midnight in that very uncomfortable, overly heated, packed council chamber, got up and pointed their... And it was overwhelmingly against this thing. And then they get up and they not only apparently didn't hear it, but they're reading from something they obviously typed that morning or the day before.
Okay, so you know what this does is it completely disillusions and repels citizen involvement in government affairs, even at the local level. Because then people are throwing up their hands saying, what did I just waste my time for? My family is at home having dinner without me. You know, I've been working since 6 a.m. Why am I here? If they're not going to listen to me, why am I here? This is what infuriates me. This is why I get, and it's a righteous anger. I don't want people out there to think I walk around as an angry, bitter woman. I'm just trying to convey an overall dissatisfaction with the way our government matters are handled. Where we start to get into something that's very interesting is when the citizens actually get involved and demand accountability, our representatives get offended. All of a sudden, they're like, well, how dare you poke your nose into our business? And no matter how many times you tell them, we are your boss. You work for us. You answer to us. You owe us an explanation. And they're out there, and these are representatives. I'm speaking specifically in Austin. And yes, I do have several in mind right now because I've had this conversation with them, reminding them that they work for us. Their staff work for us. They owe us the respect of being their bosses. The accountability factor is something that they resent. So this is something else that I bring to this election, is a full-on window into the workings, the inner workings of the government in Austin. If I go there, if the people choose to send me there as a representative, I'm going to rip away that veil of obfuscation and these hidden deals, legislation, how the legislation is actually decided before it gets to the floor, how it gets through committees where it gets deliberately stalled so that they don't actually have to be voting on it, and therefore they can't be held accountable for a vote on it. A lot of the frivolous and silly legislation that gets filed that ends up drowning the serious matters of state that must be handled. When you have 5,000 bills or 6 or 7,000 to be filed and handled within a 140-day legislative session, that's absurd. You know, you've got the serious business of the people to be handled. We don't need to be handling, I don't know, so-and-so's 98th birthday. That's all great. That's all community rah-rah type stuff. But that stuff needs to be set aside until the end, when after the legislature proves they can actually accomplish the people's business in Austin.
I never paid any attention to community politics until the last 3 or 4 years, and of course it's almost like I don't want to know anymore.
I know.
Now that I've seen the way it really works, it is discouraging.
I don't blame you.
And disillusioning. I know that there are people out there that run for office and they mean what they say at the time and they have good intentions. What happens along the way? Some stand their ground, but what happens to a person when they set out and you know they're sincere and you believe in their character and honesty, and then after a couple of years in that system, suddenly they're all full of slogans, they're saying yes to everybody, and they've got all the excuses, and then you look up and go, they didn't vote their heart, they didn't vote what they said they stood for. What do you think happens to a person to cause that?
Well, I think there's a couple of different facets. The first is always going to be money, and I'm going to get to that in a second. But probably you've heard the phrase or the old adage that politics is the art of compromise. Okay? People buy into that. They go there and they want to work with people. They want to be seen as being a team player. They want to be seen as going along to get along. And they realize, well, I can get more stuff done if I'm on such and such committee. A lot of times they will cite their constituency as the services that they can provide. because there is a retaliatory effect in government that if you don't go along to get along, you won't get choice assignments to committees or what have you. Okay, so back to this going along to get along. I've seen it happen in many levels of government that there is such a powerful pressure to conform. And truly, a lot of these guys want to be liked by one another. They worked hard to get there. Now they're inside the club. And I use that word, and it's not a euphemism. I've heard senators in Austin call it the club, and it has been cited in newspapers. They don't like the dirty public in there inside their club. They call each other honorable this and honorable that. There's very much a titled and entitled mentality amongst these players. And so when someone like me comes along, or someone like Rachel Delgado, or someone like Mary Hulls in 129, we are less than impressed with these gentlemen. We are underwhelmed with the strength of their character. And so we have a much different cadre of people that we are trying to impress. That cadre of people are the patriots that are out there on a daily basis fighting this fight. If I don't live up to their standards, that's what I'm going to worry about. I'm not going to care so much about Honorable Joe Strauss. Now, there's a lot of people that go out of their way. He's got a lot of money. He's got a lot of power. Got to impress Joe Strauss. Got to get on his good side. He's the Speaker of the House. He's the third most powerful politician in Texas. I don't buy that. I believe that the power is derived from the people. And if they send me there, I go in there to break through that old boy network, to break apart that club and let the people in. I'll be that window. I'll be that wedge that goes in and kind of pulls back the walls that block the process of legislating our laws from the people. And that's the first part of it. I think that these guys really just want to be liked. You know, an election is somewhat of a popularity contest, and then they go there believing that they're so well liked, and they want to stay liked, and they're impressed with one another. Someone like me goes in there, not so impressed, guys, not so impressed. I am impressed with the strength of character that drives the patriots that I work with on a daily basis in the trenches. I'm impressed with the true heroes of the young people who are serving in our armed forces today that would never abide by the compromise and the deal making. They're straight shooters, just cut to the chase, get the job done, and accomplish the mission. I'm extremely mission-oriented.
You're kidding.
I cannot help it.
What a surprise!
Yes, the mission trumps all, and the mission of the people is what would be my focus, not going along to get along and making buds and rubbing elbows with these guys who think that they're so important in Austin. Now, the second thing I mentioned was the money. Now, anytime you introduce money into politics, things go awry right off the bat. And you can see it already in my race, where we have a lot of people dumping an obscene amount of money into this election, because it's really about buying power. And it's about buying influence. That's what's more important to these people than accomplishing a mission, a constitutional mission. Let me give you an example. I have a campaign that's extremely grassroots, and my resources come in from people just like our listeners today, just like me, and just like you, George, $25 at a time. That $25 might, in today's economy, is as valuable to them, and then certainly as valuable to me as a $2,500 donation from a high roller to one of my opponents, or a $20,000 jackpot from a PAC that he gets and he accepts. I've accepted no PAC money. All of my money is coming from individuals in very small amounts that I'm incredibly grateful for. Now, my responsibility then as a candidate is to prove that I know the value of their dollar that they've given me, that they've entrusted to me, and I stretch it as far as it will go. I spend it prudently, wisely, and strategically. I'm not loose with my money. I shouldn't even say mine. It's theirs. I'm not loose with it. I don't have a lot of money to blow. And so I want to prove to people, and I want to lead. I am leading on the issue of fiscal conservatism, spending as little as possible to get the job done. Truly, I believe that's what voters are going to want to see in Austin with their tax dollars. But if my opponents are just going to blow through an obscene amount of money to gather power and influence to themselves, you can imagine and you can guarantee that they're going to do the same thing in Austin. And that's a warning right now to the listeners out there. Evaluate. It's always about following the money. And a politician will tell you, any politician will tell you, they never have enough money to get what they think their job is to get it done. And so they start scrambling. And they start looking about where can I go and find more money. That's how they end up taking more money from PACs and from people that maybe have a differing philosophy from them. And then what comes from that? They owe. They're beholden. And now your principles are beholden to other people who may not feel as strongly as you, who may not have the same values and principles, but they just bought entree into your life. They just bought a little part of you. That's just something it's not for sale.
Heidi, it's probably become very apparent to the listeners by now that you're quite outspoken and that you're rather intense and that you intend to go there and do something. And you have a little bit of impatience. It's like you're straining at the bit to get there to the legislature and start to work.
Right.
What kind of response are you getting within the Republican Party?
Wow, George, that's an interesting question. I am a member of the Republican Party here in Galveston County, and I'm going to be real forthright with your listeners. I've been a lifelong Republican, Reagan Republican, from the time I was a teenager, and having worked in campaigns, I've licked thousands of envelopes and called hundreds of people and whatnot over the years. However, I did leave the Republican Party in 2005 over two issues. The fact that our Republican Party was unwilling to lead on the issue of border security, and we were abdicating our responsibilities in the government. And secondly, the outrageous amount of money that our Congress was spending, and the Republicans were doing nothing to stop it, and were spending just as much, like drunken sailors. I could not stand it. And so whenever they would send me their solicitations for money, and I was so upset too with some of their nominations and how they would bury the conservatives in order to nominate a moderate or progressive Republican, what I would call a rhino. Mm-hmm. So they'd send me a solicitation for funding, and I'd say, you'll never get another dime until you start nominating true conservatives, until you show support for true conservatives, or until you secure the border, or until you stop spending tax dollars like you have an unlimited treasury. And I would write back these dissertations. So I was very disaffected, and I considered myself a uncompromising, independent conservative for several years. In fact, when John McCain was running for president, and they were always talking about him having to reach out to this independent middle, I said, people are misconstruing who is actually independent right now. Those independents are in large part supplemented by disaffected conservative voters who are so sick of both parties. And that was me. However, at the time, I was campaigning for Duncan Hunter, and I believed in him. He's an Army Ranger in Vietnam, and I was all behind him. I felt like he was running for president, and I was going to several Republican events to represent him. And I was talking with some older Republican ladies, some white-haired Republican ladies who said, honey, you need to get back into the Republican Party and pull it back to the right. It needs help. You can't do it from the outside. You got to get in there and reform the Republican Party. And these ladies were on fire. They were ready to go to war. They were in their 70s and 80s, and there was no compromise in these ladies. And I said, okay, all right, yes, ma'am, hop to it. It was kind of like jumping onto a sinking ship. That was how I felt, kind of getting back into the Republican Party. But I did, and I jumped in and got as fully engaged as possible because I really felt like it was my responsibility as a conservative to right the ship and to try and right where I saw the Republican Party going wrong. Okay, so fast forward, after the last election, I stayed for the precinct meeting, and I became a precinct chair. From there, I became a delegate to our senatorial district convention, from there to our county convention, and from there to our state convention. So now I'm in the thick of it. I'm in the platform this, and we're arguing about what we're going to put into the platform, and I'm all up into the bureaucracy now of the Republican Party. It was a hard slog because there's a whole lot of nothing that gets done in the Republican Party while they're quibbling over things that do not advance the conservative cause.
Yes.
So now here I am, I'm on fire. And I'm not a Johnny-come-lately to the conservative cause. It's just that I found myself and my personality better suited to something like the grassroots organizations that I was involved in. And then more recently, of course, the Tea Party, which is really just a more recent name for a conservative cause that I've been embroiled in for many, many, many years. I tell people I was Tea Party before it had the name Tea Party. A lot of people say that, but it's just really a conservative, constitutional conservative mission.
I think it works best when we have any election, local, national, statewide, that you have the contrast. Now, I just hate it when I see politics become about statistics and money, and they forget it's about people.
Right.
And representing people and representing ideas.
And the ideas was where I felt like I could have the most impact. I thought, okay, I'm going to come in. They're going to welcome me with open arms. I'm a female veteran. I have a lot of experience in these causes. They're going to welcome me with open arms. No. You start trying to tweak the status quo. You start trying to introduce reform into a very entrenched power structure, and you are persona non grata. However, even despite the immediate pushback that I got and that several other people that were fully engaged in the Republican Party, we still managed to get some incredibly important things done. And I'll give you an example because I want to show people that even though I go in and I'm clearly in a minority, we can still accomplish things because if you're led by the strength of your conviction, people will follow. And you can still, one person can still make a difference, or two or three. The two examples that I'd like to give is during the Speaker Showdown, I introduced to our Republican Party, our Galveston County Republican Party, a resolution wherein we called for the legislature to organize or to call a Republican caucus where we could vote for our own speaker, because there was definitely a shift after the 2010 election where we sent a lot of conservatives to the legislature, 101 conservatives. That was a conservative surge, and we deserved a conservative speaker in the House. Joe Straus would not do. And I was very gratified that the Galveston County Republican Party took action on it, and they accepted the resolution, and we passed it. And the resolution was then sent out to our legislators. Indeed, a caucus was called, but it was sabotaged by legislators inside the meeting who then forced the Republicans to, instead of what we had recommended, do a private vote, a secret ballot, force them to stand up, which made them targets then for Joe Straus and his lieutenants. It was a bad, bad call. And that movement was led by Republican Representative Dennis Bonin and allowed by the chairman of the Republican caucus, Larry Taylor, something I was very disappointed to see. Another example of a resolution that I introduced and passed in the Galveston County Republican Party is the resolution against the pledge card practice, where legislators could secretly sign their promise to vote for a certain speaker of the House, even if they went against the will of their people. And that pledge card practice is so corrupt, and it is so anathema to a people's republic. When you're pledging your support to a guy behind the scenes, when the people in your district are saying no, and then you are expressing more loyalty to that relationship than you are to your constituents, that is corruption, and that has got to go. And I'm very, very proud to say that we actually got that process abolished. It no longer exists in the legislature. And the Galveston County GOP did sign a resolution that I introduced. So I wanted to show people that even when there seems to be an array of opinion against you, the strength of your conviction can carry the day. When I'm criticizing the Republican Party, it's because I desperately want it to be stronger and better and more conservative than it is today. It's called iron sharpening iron. It's meant to improve the Republican Party. If the Republican Party cannot take criticism, then what are we doing? It has to improve. It has to get better. And there is not one Republican worth their salt out there today that can say that the Republicans are doing all that they can do when it comes to protecting and safeguarding the constitutional rights that we have as Americans and as Texans. It cannot possibly be said that they're doing enough. I truly believe that that comes out of a deep and abiding sense of loyalty and absolute commitment to the conservative cause. Now, as soon as the Republican Party starts moving to the center, then they've lost their conservative base. And I'm part of that conservative base. I would want them to understand that. I don't want them to resent the conservatives that come in with all of our energy and our ideas and our passion and our undeniable commitment to the conservative cause and to the constitutional principles that made our country great. I don't want them to resent that in us. They should be welcoming us and pulling us in and putting us to work. And I really see if a leader were to rise in the Republican Party that would bring us all together, we would be unstoppable. My opponents have never had anything to do with the Republican Party in any of years past. Nothing. They've never volunteered. They've never been involved. They've never been engaged. Nobody knew their names until they just declared themselves a candidate.
Well, speaking of knowing people's names, I've been the moderator at some of the political stuff here in Galveston where they meet the candidates. But there are so few events like that, or forums, if you will. A person like you, who is a very gifted speaker, if no one hears you, then these things can be bought out from under you. And if the party is afraid of you, I want people to be able to hear you, your philosophy and your background, and they'll see some real substance and not some sloganeering and saying yes to everybody. So I want to know, how can people see you? I mean, what's coming up? We're not even in your district. Rachel Delgado is going to be representing us, but people need to meet you and see you and hear you. Where are you going to be, or what needs to happen to produce that result?
We just finished 2 different candidate forums. One was last Thursday, hosted by the Friendswood Republican Women, a candidate forum with a round-robin format where we were to answer questions. And then just last night, we had what was a fascinating format. It was a candidate job interview.
I love that term.
I mean, if we're trying to earn your vote and you need to vet us,
yes,
this is a fantastic format to get a real read on a candidate without having them play off of the other candidates or copy their answers or what have you. Because the candidate that's not speaking is secluded in a green room and can't hear the answers. Yeah, it was really fascinating.
I didn't know that. That is interesting.
Yeah, so last night, Ryan Sitton was the first candidate to go, and I was removed from the room, and I was not allowed to have a cell phone. There could be no texting or no access to what was the questions that were being asked or his answers. And so he was given time. People could evaluate. They graded his answers on a scorecard. I came out later and went through the same questions and answered them in my own way without knowing anything about what he said. And that way people could compare and contrast. Now, what's interesting is we had an opponent not show up last night. He had committed to be there. Greg Bonin didn't bother to show up. And I've really got to call that into question. And I've heard a lot of theories as to why he didn't show up. He didn't like some of the tough questioning he'd gotten from their Friendswood Republican Women about the amount of money that he's spending in his campaign, where his funds come from. The majority of it comes from PACs. He didn't like that kind of questioning. You can speculate as to why he wasn't there. Nevertheless, he committed to be there and he blew it off. And that to me is an insult to the voters of HD 24, because it's not like he had to go do surgery. He went to an event, a meet and greet for another candidate. Bad judgment call. I really want to point that out. because if he's going to blow us off in an election event that's specifically geared to this race, when will he blow off the voters if he were to be elected? Now, you asked about future events coming up. Right now, we kind of went through a whirlwind of these forums because these forums were set up when we originally thought the primary was going to be March 6th, and then it moved to April 3rd, and now it's looking like it'll be even later. So I think right now organizations are waiting to see when the primary will be set up so that they can schedule more events accordingly. However, I'd like to make an appeal to your listeners that live in HD 24, Tiki Island and North, because I'm assuming that there's plenty of people that are not specifically on the island. And that would be, I'm truly a grassroots conservative, and I need to get in front of people, voters, on a face-to-face basis. And I will go wherever you invite me. This is a one-on-one thing. I'm a real person. It's just me, myself, and I've got some great help and some fantastic volunteers, but you call and I will answer. It's the same way I would lead if you were to send me to Austin, because that's how I live my life now. Fully accessible and fully accountable to the people. You pick up the phone, you call me, or you go through my website and say, Heidi, come on over to my neighborhood. Come on over to my group or my organization or my church or my Bible study. Introduce yourself, explain yourself to me and to my circle of influence. I'm counting on people who hear me, who say, I want to hear a little bit more about what she's got to say, and I challenge people to vet me. Now, I'm putting as much information out there about myself as I can on my website and certainly on my Facebook page. People can get a good feel about who I am through the language that I use on my Facebook page. I'm constantly updating it. You know why? Because it's free. And I am all about the free. So I use Facebook and Twitter a lot because I don't have the funds. And frankly, I shouldn't be spending the funds on a bunch of glossy mailers, one mailing that costs more than this job would pay in a year, for it to land on your doorstep and end up getting thrown away. That to me is a waste of resources.
No, you need to be in front of people.
I need to be in front of people. Invite me. Have me over. You invited me, George, and I was like, hey, buddy, I'm there.
Well, and why is that? Because I heard you speak.
Right.
I was in the crowd trying to find the people I came with, and you got up and started talking. I looked up. I was way at the other end. I saw you on one of the TV screens. Of course, I could hear you, and it was like, who is that? Heidi! And it's so funny because I always think of like Heidi, the little German milkmaid. You know, Heidi. Heidi meets the snow bunny. And you're a little different from that. It's more like, Heidi! But you're just compelling and just dripping with conviction. And I think the time is right. You seem to have come into this just when you needed to, and you could make a difference. And if this doesn't work out, you better stay in it and you go for it and stay.
I would not know how to do anything else, George. And for people out there listening, I really want to just be completely available. You can find me on my website.
And
Heidi,
what is it?
It's HeidiForTexas.com. I've taken a lot of time to write out my positions on things. I enjoy writing, and it allows me to put on paper so that you can hold me accountable to what it is that I believe. And you'll get a feel for my personality too. But for as strong as I am on these issues, I just want to remind people I'm a mom. I'm a wife. I have 2 outrageous dogs that rule my world. Especially that fat little pug. Her name is Kiwi. I've got a boxer named Beowulf, but we call him Bo for short.
Beowulf.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I can talk all day long about illegal immigration and how strongly we need to take a stand, and we must do something. And I actually have plans. I actually have strategy. We can talk about the budget. We can talk about these issues, yes. And I do consider them to be incredibly crucially important. But I also need to hear from the people what's important to them if I'm to represent them sincerely, not rhetorically, sincerely represent them. So people call me, write to me, send me an email. I read and respond to all my own email. And my email address is simply Heidi@HeidiForTexas.com. Just reach out and we'll get together. Find me on Facebook. You can go to elect Heidi Thiess on Facebook, and we'll be friends right then and there, and you'll start to see what's happening. I don't know of any other way to reach out, George. I don't have a lot of financial resources, and like I said, there's no time to waste and there's no money to waste. I cannot do this alone. It's going to require people just like me and just like you networking and standing together and saying, we've got the tiger by the tail, and we're going to send it to Austin. The number is 855-HEIDI-12. So that's 855-4343412.
What?
I got to tell you why I emphasize my first name. It's because my last name is Thiess,
Yes.
Thiess, and nobody can ever remember how to say it correctly or spell it correctly. And I've had to correct newspaper accounts because they'll transpose my last name. And I tell people, I'm like, look, all right, folks, the easy way to remember my last name is to remember the word expertise. You want to send someone with expertise to Austin. That's how you say my last name, is Thiess. But on my logo, I make it smaller. I emphasize the first name because when it comes to name recognition, if people see Heidi, they know it's me.
You betcha.
There's not a whole lot of Heidis out there anymore.
No, well, not in this area, but I'm sure if we went to Germany and Switzerland,
yes,
we would find lots of Heidis.
Yes, you would.
Listen, this was just fascinating, compelling, entertaining, you name it. And ladies and gentlemen, it's worth talking to her just because it's interesting and, well, compelling. She really is. And to see her in person is something else entirely. Whether you agree with her or not, she's got great ideas. She thinks, and she's out there. She says exactly what she means, and she makes no bones about it. You can sense the honesty. So by all means, get in touch with her and find out more. It was a pleasure. Heidi Thiess, I nearly blew it. Expertise, right?
Yes, sir.
See, you told me that the first time I met you, and I thought, she hasn't mentioned that yet. That's a good one. Expertise.
Yes. Well, George, thank you for your hospitality. Thank you for having me. I spend a lot of time out there now on the campaign trail talking about issues. And so it was a welcome opportunity to get to know you a little bit better and to talk a little bit more, get a little more personal, up close and personal.
Yes.
Because there's really no other forum out there that I would be able to do that and really just kind of let everybody know who I am. Thank you for that.
Very important to get to know the person, because when people know how you think and how you feel about things, I think trust may be the overriding consideration for any candidate. And I think you've probably gained a lot of that. When people listen to Heidi Thiess, expertise, they're going to know what they're getting and where you stand. So thank you for joining us on this rather foggy, muggy day.
My pleasure.
Electric Theater Radio Hour was written, produced, directed, scored, and performed by George Douglas Lee with me, Brenda Lee. Tell us how much you loved the show. So call
409-370-7350.
Email us at georgelee@georgedouglaslee.com. To listen to portions of this program, visit www.georgedouglaslee.com.